Lunchables, a feat of outright American innovation. 13 grams of protein, under 310 calories, 100% freshness, easy, served in lunchrooms across America.
Consumer Reports recommends that Lunchables should not be allowed in schools. It can only be harmful to children and should be avoided.
The National School Lunch Program now features apples, whole grain bread, and this. Most people probably assumed whatever this is was bad for you. But now we know independent tests showed it could lead to cancer down the road. We sat down with Consumer Reports, we discussed their study, and what it says about our food safety system, and we found big implications about the power of food conglomerates like Kraft Heinz, who see schools as the next great untapped market. But first, let's rewind to 1988 and ask the basic question. How did something as obviously unhealthy as Lunchables even get developed in the first place?
So Kraft had a problem. They had surplus amounts of processed cheese, processed ham that they wanted to sell.
That's Michael Moss. He wrote the book on the development of Lunchables and other processed foods in our industrial food system. By 1988, adults had stopped buying Oscar Mayer bologna and ham, in part because they were loaded with saturated fats and salts. Sales were so low that Kraft was looking at closing a plant in Wisconsin. But here's where it gets interesting. Research revealed that while bologna was tasty, its image was tarnished. Adults were turning away from processed red meats, but parents were searching for something convenient, a convenient lunch option for their kids. Kraft didn't just see a problem. This was an opportunity. What if this processed meat was just part of the product?
The marketing people sat around for a couple weeks and used their imagination and came up with what we now know as the Lunchables.
Executives looked to fill the compartments with carrots and apple slices, but they rotted in the weeks it took to get the trays to store shelves. So the company settled on crackers and cheese, and then they threw an ingenious tagline behind it.
All day, you gotta do what they say. But lunchtime is all yours.
Let's face it, kids have no power in their life. With Lunchables, they had power. Kids could
choose whatever bits of food they wanted to eat in whatever order that they wanted to eat.
It was a massive hit. Lunchables saved the Wisconsin factory from closing and became one of history's most successful processed food products. And now, after conquering grocery aisles, Kraft Heinz, the company behind Lunchables, is targeting schools.
We have a tremendous opportunity in areas like the $25 billion education segment.
The reason why we tested Lunchables is when this was announced last year that these products would be made available for the school lunch program, our reaction was similar to a lot of parents in that, how is a product like this being made available to our kids?
Consumer Reports worked with an independent, accredited lab to test how safe Lunchables are against California standards. Why California? We'll get to that in a moment.
So what we found in these test results for lead particularly were really high levels, especially when you factor in that there's no safe level for kids. Exposure to lead has been linked to things like heart disease, certain types of cancers.
Kraft Heinz defends itself by saying that lead naturally occurs in the food system. They're right.
Lead is contained in the water that's used in processing. It's also can be found in the soil.
But it's not the full picture.
It can be picked up in the processing equipment that companies often use when they're processing these products and putting them into the food supply. So when you combine all of that, that's how you get these high levels of lead.
Consumer Reports test also found unhealthy levels of sodium and phthalates. Phthalates are chemicals that leak into food through packaging.
The problem with phthalates is it's a hormone and estrogen disruptor. It can increase their risk of developing other health issues down the road, such as high blood pressure, certain types of cancers, and cardiovascular problems.
Kraft Heinz, of course, responded to kind of this research. And one of the things they said was all of our foods meet strict safety standards. What's your kind of reaction to that?
There are two sentences in a company press release that should always cause consumers to be skeptical. First, at Company X, food safety is our top priority. Typically, when they're writing that, it's because they've done something wrong or about to do something wrong. The second sentence is, we follow the strictest standards available. And sometimes the reason they say that is because they're virtually non-existent.
Which is why Consumer Reports used California standards.
There are no enforceable federal standards as it relates to lead. And so it's very easy for companies to say that we're following a standard because they don't exist.
They also said, from a nutritional standpoint, our NSLP approved Lunchables can be a part of a well-balanced school meal. What's your reaction to that?
The emphasis should be on the well-balanced part and not necessarily on the Lunchables. When you look at a product that's less than 4 ounces that contains over half of the daily sodium intake, that's really problematic. It's important to note that we didn't test the school lunch versions for this testing project. We were only able to test the grocery store bought versions. But in looking at the labels that are made available online, the school lunch version of Lunchables have higher sodium levels.
So why are Lunchables in schools? It's really a combination of 2 different factors. The first is the guidelines. According to Brian, the USDA guidelines determine nutritional targets, including the allowable sodium level.
So as long as a product follows a particular guideline that USDA has set, then that product is allowed.
Kraft Heinz says they have improved nutrition that meets the federal guidelines for the National School Lunch Program.
Here's what they're not saying. The government recently revised the guidelines. In order to be eligible for elementary school lunches, a product can have up to 935 milligrams of sodium.
The Lunchables turkey and cheddar cracker stackers, the school version contains 930 milligrams. So they just fit under the new nutritional guidelines that will continue to be eligible for being in the school lunch program.
The second is lobbying. In the last 5 years, Kraft Heinz has spent over $5 million lobbying the federal government. A big chunk was on USDA food purchasing programs, which house the school lunch program. One of the tricky things is that local school districts, not the USDA, are the ones setting menus and making the actual purchasing decisions. The Washington Post has been investigating the addition of Lunchables to school programs, and a lot of it just comes down to the local leadership. Some districts are okay with Lunchables. Others aren't. New York City and Houston won't sell them because they're unhealthy. So what can people do?
It's really important for parents to know that they should work with their kids and figure out what options are being made available in their local school program, what options are available in the cafeteria, and then encourage them to pick options that are lower in sodium, pick fresh fruits and vegetables.
But there's also something a bit bigger. According to Kraft Heinz's own research, 99% of the coverage of Lunchables being sold in schools has been positive. Consumers can actually fight back.
We are encouraging people to sign a petition that urges USDA to remove these products from the school lunch program. What we want to do is present these signatures to USDA to really highlight how concerned parents are about this. They can influence this process, and they can influence state and local school districts to remove these products.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. If you have ideas for stories you want us to uncover next, please drop them in the comments below.